Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Racial
Evening all.
Profiling Ad Hoc. Our meeting is starting now. It's 6:02. I know we're still waiting for Commissioner Acosta, but I think, and Chair Peterson. But I think we're going to, in the interest of efficiency, we're going to go ahead and start. How's everybody doing?
Very good.
Well,
Very
thank you.
well, thank you.
Oh, excellent. So glad to hear it. And I want to once again thank Michelle for not only doing the notes for us, but also trying to get us coordinated around a timeline for movement forward. Did everybody get to review that information? Because I can go back over it if need be. I know I reviewed it last week when she first sent it. So now, of course, I probably have forgotten some stuff.
Would you like for me to share? I can put it on the screen for you. Michelle's
Oh,
notes.
perfect.
Okay, give me a
Welcome,
second.
welcome, Commissioner Garcia Acosta. I was just asking if everybody had had a chance to review the email that Michelle sent to us, giving an overview of our meeting as well as a timeline moving forward. I wanted to review that, make sure that everybody is on the same page. And I don't know if anybody had any thoughts or, something that got overlooked that's got to be in there. But it can be in tonight's minutes. So everybody's good? Okay, I will take silence as tacit approval. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, thank you. I'm getting all kind of thumbs up. I love those. So according to the agenda topics, and we can, well, we'll take them as they're listed. So what we wanted to do was solidify objectives and content for the letter to post. But I think, yes, Lieutenant Hubbard, we're going to need you to identify what we think is missing in the training. So if you're okay with that, I'm going to delay that and push that back because we still are kind of trying to figure out what it is that we want to do that we will then document to post. So B was possibly have commissioners observe the racial profiling training or sit through the training. Now, I am absolutely, go ahead, Michelle.
I just wanted to know if we could step back to the first item, just because I want to kind of give Lieutenant Hubbard some space to see timeline wise if there's any assistance that we can provide with that information. Is there anything that we should review curriculum wise to see if we can identify some gaps to help support, or if that is something that you can do solely and then maybe provide, if not next meeting, the meeting after, to come back with some thoughts, deliverables, guidance.
Yeah, thank you. What I can do is send you all the post workbook on this subject and also the training and testing specs so you know exactly what is taught in the academy. The one challenging thing is there's a learning portal that they provide, and it's basically a somewhat interactive video that they show to address this topic. That's not necessarily accessible to the public, so getting that to you will be challenging, but we can think of some innovative ways. But minimally, I can send you what we teach in the academy, and I figure that throughout this journey that we have together, we're going to have a lot of ideas on what the curriculum should look like. And I think the reporting back to POSA what we think the model should be to include our policy, I think would
Yeah.
come at the end of this ad hoc. That's how I envision that.
Oh, no, absolutely, Lieutenant Hubbard, and you're getting some
I like it.
up and down, agreement from the IG. I would say that I wanted to ask, has the training already reflected some of the IG's recommendations, or has it not yet been updated to reflect that?
Not as yet. I think my response is due next week, and then
Okay.
soon after that, that's when we can solidify something and start rolling that out.
Okay, that sounds great. And Deacon Lyles?
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions
Mhm.
just to refresh my understanding. The training academy that we're talking about is held at OPD, correct?
It
Yeah.
is.
OPD has its own
Yes.
post academy. All right. So the curriculum has to be trained. The training of the curriculum has to be a post approved training, but it cannot OPD augment to that training at their own expense.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's a great question. We can. So the way it works is that whatever we teach in the academy, I'm just going to stick to the academy right now. We can talk about in-service training. That's when someone graduates the academy. So the academy has to be post-certified. We have to teach minimally what post requires, which is in the workbook and training and testing specs. However, after one graduates the academy, we actually keep them for about 6 weeks to augment their training. So it was an effort to shorten the academy, but it allowed us more latitude of what we want to teach to include, let's say, for example, the history of the NSA. I invite Mr. Channing in and some others to speak to that. That does not need to be post certified, which gives us a lot of room there. So the way I envision this is that they can graduate the academy. We provide what post says we have to provide, and then after the academy, soon after, before they hit the street, we could give them our own curriculum.
Okay. But does post have the power to say, while you're teaching our domain, if OPD wants to say ABCD and then add at the same sitting EFG at our own expense? Post can't say you're not allowed to add anything to it, or can they say you're not allowed, you're prohibited to add anything to the training?
They can in the academy setting because it's post certified. They have control over everything. So they basically can say, "Hey, we won't certify you if we disagree with." Now, it doesn't mean that I can't try. I'm just saying they, at the end of the day, can say,
now that's clarity to me. I now it makes sense. So you're saying the augmenting training is like a part of the FTO program?
right before the FTO program. So they graduate the academy the following week. They're back in the classroom, and we provide more specific training that's outside the scope of post because it's not certified.
So this is Oakland specific training.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. Okay, thank you very much.
Right. And to your point, Deacon, the whole reason that post came up was because, I mean, I am a fundraising expert, right? I know that people who say we don't invite, uninvited people need not apply. But I'm like, you all don't know about all the fabulous programs. So I'm going to send it to you anyway. And some people do actually give us money. But to that point, oftentimes Post doesn't know everything that's going on. We have some really important updates, and we think that we can improve upon Post certified training. And so it is the Oakland way to alert them via narrative, as well as whatever the change to the training that we're recommending is, to hopefully get them to update their own approach. And if I'm not saying that accurately, please, Lieutenant Hubbard, IG Phillips, correct my language. But I think that was the goal, to let them know what new things are on the horizon that we think are exceedingly important to be included in the racial profiling training. Okay, I'm getting head nods. Yay.
And
Yep,
you
well
also
said,
said,
well said.
and Lieutenant, you said it's about a 6-week window.
We keep them for about 6 weeks, so we have a lot to fill in that time, and we can make this as long or as short as we want.
Thank you. And Deacon, did you have more questions or?
No, that satisfies me. I think it's beautiful that Oakland wants to say this is what we want our officers to know, and it could be more than what Post demands. But Post is not the arbiter of everything righteous,
Not in Oakland, that's right.
or any other place in California. It's
There
just
you go.
it's just the best that they can do. That's a consensus, and to be honest with you, it's heavily dominated by the thinking in Southern California because they get their resources from tickets violations, and most of the money comes from Southern California.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that piece of information. IG, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to supplement some of the information that Lieutenant Hubbard provided. When Lieutenant Hubbard was over training, he did welcome and still continues to extend that opportunity for the OIG to come and observe. So I observed transitional, that's what I call it, transitional training, maybe twice. It could have been just once. And then I did CPT as well. And I sat down and then, of course, provide debriefs and talk to Lieutenant Hubbard, who's always willing to have dialogue, anything that I wasn't quite sure about or understood. And he also provided any materials, as well as Sergeant Malantakai at that time as well. So I just want to, while we're in this space, let folks know that that was an option and an extension from Lieutenant Hubbard and OPD to allow the OIG to sit down and observe those trainings and participate. I participated in defensive tactics as well, just because that's a me thing.
I appreciate you sharing that information. I would like to say, well, I'd like to, would you like to share? Well, let me go back. For the audience, the Zoom audience, can you identify what CPT is? IG?
Go ahead, Lieutenant Hubbard. I see you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called continual police training, and it actually is a post mandate. Every officer and sergeant has to go through it every 2 years, but we actually we actually move ours up, so it's usually every year where officers and sergeants go through that. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And I know that it's real easy to fall into acronyms and all, but even I need to be reminded, so thank you. With respect to that scenario, my question won't be, will you allow commissioners to participate? Because I'm sure you will, right? Once it's done. That's great.
Yep.
And then the third, or C, that IG Phillips included was that we could possibly suggest a longer, more robust training to include external facilitators or subject matter experts like Dr. Eberhard or Director Flynn. And I would presume that our communication staff could also create the video to document that, right?
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to ask them to come every time. We want something that will serve to identify their presence and their contributions. Okay.
That's right.
All right, perfect. Have I left anything out from section 1, A, B, and C in Michelle's minutes? Nope. Okay.
I have a
So
question here, Regina.
I'm sorry,
I
Micah?
have a question. Yeah, can you see the notes that I put on? Okay, perfect.
I can. I just also happen to be looking at them on my phone, so my
Got it.
apologies.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Sure. So I have one question or comment, and Lieutenant Hubbard and or the IG. I know that for the first time ever, CIPRA recently sustained a racial profiling case. And I called the CIPRA director, and obviously you all can weigh in, but I thought it might be important for us to highlight, not just for ourselves, but for the listening public, how do we think that came about? You know, for the first time ever, right? And it's not that I want to be out there sustaining lots of racial profiling. I don't want to see it at all, but I definitely want to ensure that, you know, if it's a duck and it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, that we call it a duck. And that would be racial profiling. I can share what Mr. Muir shared with me and have you all shake your heads, or we can listen to why you think perhaps without any, you know, release of confidentiality, because I do remember that this just came through a discipline committee. So I'm not interested in getting, you know, real granular, but wanting to kind of keep it up here in terms of what your thoughts are of what was the difference in all the, you know, historical non-racial profiling cases. Now, if
Yes.
y'all want me to share the
So
notes that I took, I can, but go ahead.
I'll go ahead. I'll jump in. I don't have as much historical context, of course, as Lieutenant Hubbard has. I've been here just about 2.5 years. But I think, honestly, I think it's a culture shift. There are some folks who are questioning certain behaviors in a way that we are now having very robust conversations about what is happening and how to identify what is happening. And when there is agreement to disagree, then of course there are now discipline committee options. And people are just standing on how they perceive certain actions. But I can honestly say over the time of when I started here to now, there are very, very robust conversations when it comes to discipline, when it comes to certain allegations, prior to even getting to the opportunity for discipline, and really getting to the granular level and stepping back from people's personal perspectives and just looking at the facts and allowing the facts to guide how we look at certain things. And I think that, you know, that speaks volumes, quite frankly, in my observations to the evolution, you know, slowly but surely, but of OPD and the CPRA as well coming in. And, you know, if we're not okay with it, then CPRA is saying they're not okay with it. And that's okay. There are mechanisms in place to move forward with that. So just, you know, just staying on a very high level as we move forward through this process. We have work to do. I'm not going to sit there and say we're where we need to be. This also can be supplemented with policies as we continue to do this policy work to provide the investigators, both IAD and CPRA investigators, clear understanding as to what prohibitions on certain misconduct is. So we'll continue to do the work so that we don't have to have too much confusion or people have to interpret policy. And we have several people in certain spaces, and some folks read things a little bit differently, and it's nothing wrong with that. So that's what the OIG is doing, is trying to make sure that there is clarity as we review a lot of these policies, given some of the resourcing constraints that OPD has when looking at this particular type of work. Not saying that they don't do it, but the OIG, we're just trying to be as proactive to help to supplement that. And I'll go ahead and defer. I do see the chair's hand up, but I would like to hear from Lieutenant Hubbard as well.
Right. Can we hold chair and just let Lieutenant Hubbard finish this, and then we'll take your question? Okay, thank you. Lieutenant
Yeah,
Hubbard?
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I have to just be careful what I say here because there's only so much I know about that case, and it's a disciplinary issue. The one thing I will say though, however, is whenever issues like this come up, and I agree with IG Phillips, is the first thing I look to is our training and policy. And if there's room there for growth, then we need to jump on it right away. And the other thing is, oftentimes when it comes to issues within the police department and really externally too, just with other departments, is we oftentimes move on without w- uh quickly doing a debrief and like, what can we do right now to train the issue and fix the issue. And we have some opportunities that pass us oftentimes that we need to, I think, shore up.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. We're gonna go to the chair and then I'm gonna share what I've learned, so that we can then think about, creating some, notes. Chair Peterson, welcome. I don't think you're on, I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, and without, disclosing too many details, and thank you, Chair Emeritus, for chairing this racial profiling ad hoc. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do right now. I just think there was a lot of preparation, and I again, I've only been in this space for about three and a half years. And I haven't, that was my first disciplinary committee, but I think that there was very good preparation on the part of CIPRA in terms of laying out what the law was and what the facts were. There was some concern about, you know, does it apply to this group or does it apply to the other group? And the law was pretty clear on that, how that should be decided. So I think it was good preparation because honestly, the OPD came with a full-on defense of the position that IED had taken. And I think with careful consideration by the members of the disciplinary committee combined with the work and detail that CIPRA presented helped make the decision that was made. Now, I don't know how many times in the last 3 years since I've been on the commission has there been a racial profiling case brought so that we would have some data as to why this is the first one as opposed to other opportunities in the past that were missed.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it was the type of case, internal case, or case that also was presented to CIPRA. There were some nuances that made it fairly not. It wasn't simple because we were there for several hours, but once the building blocks were set, it was a pretty easy case to finally conclude there was racial profiling. But I don't know, maybe the agency director or
I'm so sorry, Chair. I'm just gonna interject. I want you to just be very careful with what we say, given that this is a public platform and it's recorded.
I agree with you.
Has,
I hope I haven't said too
has
much.
right.
Well,
I'm trying
hopefully not.
hard not to. I'm trying
Hopefully
hard
not.
not to.
But
But I
thank you.
think
I
it-
appreciate. Go ahead.
I think it had to do with the clarity of the facts that were given to us in the law.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
And appreciate your contribution, especially since you were on the discipline committee. I'm going to share what was shared with me and IG, Lieutenant Hubbard, Chair Peterson. If I'm sharing something that is too much or something, please stop me and I will stop. So apparently OPD's manual has two categories for the racial discrimination, racial profiling, which is obviously under the DGO of M19. But there's also a harassment and discrimination policy. And that identifies conduct under A171. Now, because we don't have a manual of rules, we can't, go back and reference that, but apparently the distinction between racial profiling is like, being a class 1 or class 2. Uh, Class 1 is seemingly reserved for like extreme actions like stalking or whatever, cases where it's really overt. And you can, but apparently the
So
distinction around,
I'm just gonna step in really, really quick because I think that this may be opinions and not necessarily clear.
okay, okay. So
I
all I know is that he said to me that OPD has discretion in terms of identifying whether it's class 1 or class 2. And typically it has been identified as class 2, which then doesn't have it come under the racial profiling indices. If anybody wants to disagree or say that what I, learned was absolutely false, please let me know. But it could be that because the tendency has been to classify as class 2, that there just haven't been opportunities for a quote unquote racial profiling case. Go ahead. I hear you thinking out loud, Michelle. Go ahead.
no, it's a sensitive topic and without data to support certain statements, I'm not going to speak to that. I don't think that that's
Okay.
fair to generalize certain practices, but that's something that the OIG can definitely take a look at and look into.
Okay.
I'm just not going to do that.
No. That's fine. And, Lieutenant Hubbard, you don't have to weigh in if you are uncomfortable or, feel the same as the IG. But it sounds like it was kind of a simple piece.
Well, again, lacking data, I don't know why more of these cases haven't been brought to a head, and
Right.
I don't know if it has to do with CIPRA not being involved, and therefore finding a different finding from IAD, and therefore it hasn't been brought.
Yeah.
That's data that we're missing.
Okay. Well, to that point, then I actually thought that this conversation might be helpful because it was such a, a new thing. But it sounds like we've got to answer more questions. So I don't want to take us too far off track. Are you good with that, Lieutenant Hubbard?
I am, and I think going back to when we met 2 weeks ago, I think we wanted to have a standalone manual of rules section for racial profiling because
Yeah.
harassment covers a lot of things. So, and I don't think that's difficult to do.
Okay. That sounds great. And I will get back on track to our agenda topics. Second, we were supposed to discuss pretextual stops. What is defined as a pretextual stop? And I'm obviously Lieutenant Hubbard, we want you to define that for us and for the audience at home.
Certainly. The simplest definition is it refers to a practice where police officers stop a vehicle for a minor traffic violation. That has many definitions within itself of what a minor is, but it's typically for like equipment violations, so like a broken taillight or no license plate. And it serves as a pretext to investigate a more serious crime. And if I may, I'll just give you an example. And this is a very hypothetical, but let's say there's a intelligence of a robbery that just occurred, and we don't have any subject information, but there's a description of, let's say, a white car with no license plates. So that can encompass many different vehicles, but an officer sees a white car with no license plates, and what they would do is they would do a pretext stop. They would stop the car for no license plate, but their desire is to investigate further on the robbery. That's a very simple example to explain what that is.
Okay, that is very helpful. And as it relates to number 2, In what context are pretextual stops discussed during risk management meetings?
Yeah, thank you for that. So there's really two types of stops that we teach, and we speak to the podium for watch commanders and sergeants to their officers. The first one is intel-led stops. So if we have specific intelligence based on the crime that the officer just responded to or is investigating for from our investigations division or intel officers, then that would be intel led. So what led me to the stop is I'm investigating this, and here is the background of that.
Mm.
Number two would be high injury network stops, where we're unfortunately having a lot of fatal accidents in the city of Oakland with reckless driving, and so we identified various areas in Oakland that are prone to these types of accidents. And if an officer observes not minor traffic violations, but speeding and reckless driving, then we encourage them to make that stop for the safety of Oakland. There is a process, however, to verify that we are stopping for those two reasons. The first one is an officer is mandated to fill out a stop data form that we talked about a couple weeks ago, but also with that is a narrative that the sergeant has to review and approve. At the risk management meetings that we hold monthly, we provide data to the captains as saying, okay, and let's say area 3, officers stop these many vehicles, and the chief will ask the captain, are these stops in alignment with our values, which is to make them intel led to where we can reduce crime and or high injury networks, and the captains would speak to that. So ideally they would have to dig into each of those stops to make sure that it's in alignment with those values.
And can the data inform the trajectory of this ad hoc? But I guess, let me go back. Are there times when sergeants won't approve? And if so, what do those look like?
Yeah, there are times where they won't approve. Oftentimes it's just missing data, and actually the system's set up that where it will reject it anyway. You can't even submit it.
Mm.
But moreover, where I see the most rejections are officers not articulating enough why they made that stop. And we really, and this dates back to early when I was in training, that we really pushed that narrative in training of, hey, every stop, it's intrusive regardless what the reason is, and you need to take the time to articulate what you observed and why it was constitutional. And often sergeants, if it's missing important information such as that, they will kick it back to the officer. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And so I had kind of moved forward, but I'm gonna take Deacon Lyle's question. Deacon? You had your hand up, Deacon.
Yeah, I know. Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
yeah, yes, yes,
was
I can.
muted. I'm sorry about that. I'm not
That's
trying
good.
to be difficult, but I think for full disclosure, and I'm assuming everybody here knows that in order to make a stop starting January 1, 2024, police officers have to tell the person why they're making the stop. So we need to make sure everybody who's listening to us knows that. And we need to say that over and over, okay? And then secondly, police officers can no longer come up and say, do you know why I stopped you? Or they can no longer say, yeah, do you know how fast you were going? And all of that kind of trickery stuff. Now here's where the conflict comes in, as far as I'm concerned. Because you used the words, Lieutenant Hubbard, constitutional. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it not constitutional that the Supreme Court has allowed police officers to lie to people in the investigations. They clean it up by using the word ruse, R-U-S-E, but that's just a nice word for lying. So an officer can look at someone who's innocent and lie to them about why they stopped them or what someone said they saw them do or what someone told them that they had were trying to do. And all of that is not true. That tends to happen historically to African Americans. So there's where, and I have to say Latinos also, excuse me, I saw your eyebrows raised there, Ricardo, because you're right. It happens to African Americans, people of color, more often than not. So that's where it's murky at for me.
You asked a question that you wanted to confirm, or were you making the confirmation?
I actually want to see Lieutenant Hubbard put his head up and down like he did, because I already know that's the truth.
Okay.
You know, but the public doesn't know that.
Correct.
The public has an assumption that when an officer in uniform asks them a question, the officer is telling them and asking them what they honestly believe and honestly been told. But it could very well be a prevarication, and the Constitution allows officers to do that.
Correct. And so I just want to restate what you mentioned, which is as of January 1, 2024, officers must tell people while they're making stops. They don't ask, did you know, that, to get them to confirm whatever. It is a statement that must be made. And thank you, Lieutenant Hubbard, for the up and down. Commissioner Garcia Acosta, and then OIG.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So just for clarification purposes, it sounds like they're not allowed to ask these questions anymore, but under certain circumstances, they can still, what was the word that was used? Ruse, that we could still kind of.
Exactly. The Constitution allows officers to outright, let's say lie. They can just lie to someone because they thought they are the suspect and I'm investigating this. And so they can lie to a person and the person's totally innocent. And it's, well, we have 5 people who saw you do blah, 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 blah. Not true. That's why we stopped you. Gotcha. That's why you've been put. That can also be part of the racial profiling.
So it's also this kind of this weird hodgepodge then of being able to do that, right, under the Constitution, right. But then also now new laws in California also not allowing them to ask kind of these questions, right? That
right. And then the bottom line, it tends to, by percentage, always affect people of color more than not.
Absolutely. And I think the last statement I was going to make really quick before I was done, I just want to tie this all together. And the reason why, and I really appreciate that little tidbit of information, Deacon Lyles, and I was also nodding my head too, because African-American Black folks get pulled over way more at a higher disparity. So agreeing with you on that as well. And, one of the things, if you all remember, one of my first votes on the commission was sort of a symbolic vote. And at the time we were discussing OPD's allowable times that they're able to turn off their body-worn camera, right? And one of the things that I was really concerned about was that in the language that we're looking at some of the edits was allowing them when interviewing a quote-unquote prospective informant. And given the fact that the Constitution allows people to lie and they're allowed to turn off their camera when identifying a prospective informant, I just think that creates a problematic mix of conditions that could lead to racial profiling, intimidation, and or some level of just manipulation, right? When talking to people in the community that are getting pulled over. And so I just kind of wanted to put that out there, and I think I'll definitely want to be exploring kind of like the intersectionality between those different things at some point.
I appreciate that comment and that continuum. around when people can do what, especially with the camera. IG Phillips?
Thank you, Chair. I'm gonna get back on camera in a second. I was having some tech issues, so I had to go into another room. So my apologies all. I think what I'm kind of hearing from Deacon Lyles as well as from Commissioner Garcia Acosta is that maybe we can utilize this platform as an ad hoc to do a town hall, maybe an informational session. These are new laws that just came out, and educating community where folks are informed. And I say that not to go off kilter, but I was stopped a couple of years ago and I was told that my brake light was out and I knew it was. And I had a passenger with me and I asked the officer, this was not, of course, this wasn't in Oakland. I just want to say that I asked the officer if he mind if I had my passenger press the brake and him and I could both see if that light was out. And he, oh no, it's okay. You know, I knew it wasn't out, but because I just got it fixed. So I knew it wasn't out, and I think that that is something that folks have challenges with, and then this could potentially initiate individuals to start veering away from an officer, or now a pursuit is in tow because someone is potentially getting pulled over for misleading reasons. I'll say misleading reasons, and not saying who does or who doesn't do it, but educating the citizenry and the residents that we serve, I think, is very important. I also want to tap in, and I'm unclear about the commission if they received any deliverables. So maybe a month or two ago, the commission had given us, meaning CPRA, OPD, and the OIG, several laws that kind of came into effect. And they asked us, you know, how does this impact your work? And how can this information inform the commission's work? And I think that that's something that we can utilize and as a catalyst to inform residents about these things, particularly the underserved. And I know that Commissioner Ricardo Garcia Acosta has several partnerships in community and probably the people that we really need to reach. So I think that that might also be a deliverable. But I would love to hear from Lieutenant Hubbard. And my question, was there any deliverable that was given to the commission regarding that? If so, I'd like to read it. I'll yield.
So that's to Lieutenant Hubbard, correct? Or are you asking the commissioners, was there a deliverable?
Oh no, I know there was an ask. I wasn't clear.
Okay, you're asking if we actually received something from anyone.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes you just got to make it plain, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, there's no one here to speak for CIPRA, but Lieutenant Hubbard, can you respond?
I made myself deliverables. I have a list of things that I want to include in our new M19 policy, not just the recommendations from IG Phillips, but other things that we need to improve on, to include how just general customer service when we do detain someone or we do arrest them, taking in the Assembly Bill 2773 of telling the person the reason for the stop, but other things on top of that to include officer identification. I have a separate policy that I wrote months ago. We're waiting for IMT, independent monitoring team approval. Try not to use acronyms. Where an officer needs to identify him or herself when engaging someone. It's not just for the subject who's on the other end of that detention, but also for the community so they know that we are on scene. So I have a long list of deliverables for myself, is what I'm saying.
That sounds fabulous. And it sounds like we're going to have a lot of really robust recommendations to add to the policy because you've already been looking at it, because IG Phillips has reviewed it, and because we have new laws on the books. So thank you. I don't know if your long list makes you tired or not, but I'm glad that you have it. If there are, let's see, and so the question that was posted in the webinar chat is, the question is, do they have to tell the truth when they tell why they're stopping? We know they should, but what's your response, Lieutenant Hubbard?
Yeah, and so this is where if I were writing the bill myself, I mean, I'm actually going to post the text of the bill in there. It says that upon when an officer making a stop or car stop or pedestrian stop, they must, quote, state the reason for the stop unless the officer reasonably believes that withholding the reason for the stop is necessary to protect life or property. The one thing that's interesting about this, it doesn't say the full reason for the stop. So if I go back to my original example of the no license plate, if I tell the person, hey, I stopped you because you don't have a license plate, and I don't tell them anything else, I technically satisfy the requirement of this bill. But I will post it. But yes, they have to be truthful, because at the end of the day, there's a foundational reason for the stop. And even if it's a minor reason, that still has to be disclosed.
Thank you, Lieutenant Hubbard. And so we do know that from time to time, officers are untruthful. Do we have any experience or data that tells us, how often it's misused? Or is it because now we're only 3 months into the new law that we probably are maybe comparing apples and oranges?
Possibly, and thank you for that. I am interested in how we are complying with that law. I know we actually put out training yesterday about ensuring that if a citation is issued, that the officer is proactively writing that on the citation just so we can track it. But what I like to see is the necessary documentation that goes with that detention, that they're proactively saying and doing what this assembly bill mandates.
Okay. Chair Peterson, followed by Deacon Lyles.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my concern here is that if a citizen is pulled over and if the body worn camera isn't immediately activated, we will not know what happened in that exchange other than what the citizen says, and that word against the officer. So I would like to know, Lieutenant Hubbard, and I know I was on that body worn camera ad hoc, when is it that the body worn camera is turned on? Is it as soon as the officer leaves his or her patrol car, or when the officer engages with the citizen? When does that occur? So we would have some primary evidence rather of what was said to the citizen when the citizen stops and engages with the officer.
Yeah, thank you for that. Our policy requires, and I'll read it and then I'll also post it in the chat. Members wearing a body worn camera shall activate it prior to participating in any of the following circumstances. And number 2 is detention and arrest. So they are supposed to activate it prior to the detention, which means, let's just take a vehicle stop. When the driver pulls over, it needs to be activated. So not waiting until you're walking up to the vehicle and actually engaging the person. It's when the person pulls over and the detention is affected, which would then mean that the interaction is then captured in its entirety.
Okay, all right. And again, remind me, what is the penalty for not turning on that body worn camera at that time as designated?
It is, and I'm testing my memory here. It is a manual of rules violation. And if it's a class 2, so it can be handled by the supervisor and commander. But if there's a pattern of this, then we would refer to internal affairs.
Aha, so that is going to be my third question. That pattern in practice. It's like I've been in some of these IAD meetings and it's like we know it when we see it. And that's why we've been waiting for that definition of pattern in practice. Because that's too much discretion to the supervisor.
Of course. And thank you for your patience with that. I actually met with Director Muir yesterday and provided a presentation on that. What my goal is with that. And I also met with our monitoring team and asked for technical assistance, and they provided great feedback, and I know where to go from here.
Okay, thank you.
That's excellent. Deacon Lyles? Deacon Lyles, you're on.
I'm sorry, I keep muting myself. I'm sorry. The question I want to respond to is, do they have to tell the truth when they tell you why they are stopping you? I guess that's what the questioner means. And I would say no. I would say constitutionally, they do not. And this is one of those gaps that are in policy and constitution that's covered up in gray, and that when you have someone that has done something egregious, and then they go through the process like we have at Oakland, CIPRA and all of that, and then they comes to the punishment phase and receiving some penalty. Then they go and, of course, OPOA is going to defend them. And then this is how it's always reversed. Because that gap between what we want and what the Constitution says they can do, you can drive a truck through it. And so we have to be honest. Now, if Oakland Police Department was a learning organization that wanted to know the mistakes that they have made in the past and wanted to sincerely correct them and behave differently, then I would say, okay, we're heading in the right direction. But there's nothing in the history of Oakland Police Department that I know of and have studied and have read about, and that all of you should have read about also, that indicates anything like they even want to learn where they've made a mistake and then thereby do something better. What they seem to be, and this is not just Reggie Lyles talking, this is, federal judges saying this and other folks saying it, and even themselves saying it, that, look, it seems like they prefer to find ways to avoid accountability. So if you have a gap in here where, like you said, Ms. Jackson, well, we know they should do this, but they should, they don't. Not all of them don't, but the ones that end up being an egregious case, they don't. And then when we go through the process of saying we want to hold them accountable, they are not held accountable. That's why I say over and over and over, if anyone just read Writers Come Out at Night, chapters 9 and 10, those are documented evidence of recent history of just what we're talking about. The gap between what we want you to do, what the law said you should do, and what OPD then finds a way to not doing, but saying that we're doing it. But when someone is caught, doing something, some malfeasance, then there's a gap for them to escape. And these people go on to different police departments, become chiefs of police, and all kinds of stuff. And we have the document evidence. So either we were saying data, either we believe the data that has been researched, or we don't believe it. So I'll end there.
Good points. And I think that, excuse me, we would like to ensure that because truthfulness comes with it a fireable offense, we would like to think that people understand whatever was in the past is in the past. It's that you got to have a new attitude today. You got to tell the truth. And to Lieutenant Hubbard's point, it's like you got to be Nordstrom with it. You got to have the customer service on there like you work for the community, because you do.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Lieutenant Hubbard?
Yeah, I would just say, like, I think this is the beauty of us revamping our policy. I mean, regardless of what I know the U.S. Supreme Court's very broad. This assembly bill is getting to a good point, but it's still very broad. We can make it how we want to make it. So that's the beauty of us meeting and revamping policy.
That part is very exciting.
I'd like to ask a question.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't know whether that was a new hand or an old hand, and I forgot to ask. Go
No,
ahead,
that's
Chair.
okay. I just am wondering though, with our policy written, but more so, and I don't want to put too much on this body worn camera, but I don't know, Deacon Lyles, if there would be much room for them to lie if there is body worn camera evidence of what was said and what was done. That's why I asked whether or not there are penalties, and are there penalties enough? Because I don't like this pattern and practice and the supervisor having the discretion to determine whether or not there is a pattern or practice. I think first time is this violation, you get that. Second time is that. The third time, it's like no tolerance. I wanted zero tolerance when we were debating the body worn camera, but if we don't, I don't like this. I know it when I see it, pattern and practice. So I'm looking for something fairly straightforward, Lieutenant Hubbard, when you come back with this pattern or practice definition. Because there, we can't continue like this. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. And I see hands up from Deacon Lyles and Commissioner Garcia Acosta, and forgive me because I don't know when they went up.
I think
Okay, so Deacon
Ricardo Costa goes
right?
first. I spoke, so you go first, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. No, I do not want to keep on beating this dead horse, but I do want us to recognize that there is a difference between, and Lieutenant Hubbard, please correct me if I'm speaking out of line, but when I'm looking at some of this stuff, that a lot of this stuff sounds really good when it comes to day-to-day practice of patrol and interactions with community, day-to-day stops, right, and things like that. But I also want to think of it in the lens of high profile, high target ceasefire stops as well. And I think that's different. And I keep on going back to my concern around the allowance of turning off the body worn camera, because theoretically, if ceasefire is making a targeted stop on a quote unquote potential informant, they know who it is, they're going to turn that camera off from the very beginning. And that doesn't give us any insight or any clue to any type of coercion, intimidation, or anything that's going on in that interaction that leads for somebody to give up evidence or to make to gather information for investigative purposes. So, there's a lot of things that sound really good and I think could work on a day-to-day basis, but then I'm always thinking of how does this play out through the lens of high profile, high-end targets that may be on ceasefire targeted enforcement radar. Just wanted to be clear about that.
Appreciate that. And I believe IG Phillips is next, or are we going back to you, Deacon?
Yeah,
Going back to Deacon, sorry.
okay, okay. I was on that body worn camera ad hoc also. And when we finished that document, because we went at it back and forth about the morality and the principle ethics of that policy. And again, folks who represented the department was saying, well, we don't want to discipline anybody if they only turned it off one time. I mean, that's what we would hear.
Yeah.
So there is a huge gap between what some of us think is ethically correct and what some folks think that no, this is proper police work. This is police work. It's not constitutional police work, but it's good police work. This is street enforcement. And if you have never worked the street, you don't know what we have to put up with. Our job is so hard, blah, 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 blah. So that is in practical reality ends up being people lying on affidavits, lying on search warrants, kicking in doors of homes that that CI said you can kick in. That's where the drug is being sold, and it's a lie. Testing supposed contraband and saying that they tested it. All of this is data documented. All of this is hard case documented. And when you talk to people of the quality of officer like Lieutenant Hubbard, they wouldn't do it. But it's being done. And so again, what do we tell the public? Not trying to excite the public or make anybody think Oakland's a horrible place or anything like that. But what do we tell the public? You need to understand that the police department will not tell you the truth. And if they ask you a question, they could be lying to you. And constitutionally, it allows them to lie to you. Now, I know they're supposed to tell you why they stopped you and all that stuff, but when under distress, under the pressure of we got to make this arrest, we got to do this, we got to clean up this situation, we got to do blah, 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 the Bill of Rights gets pushed to the side all the time. Now, if I wanted to be popular, I wouldn't be on this thing and tell you this. But that's the gospel. That's the naked truth.
Yes. And thank you for saying it as plainly as you have. And so what the audience at home needs to know is if the officer has not made a move to do anything with the camera, you don't know for sure if it's on or off, but we will identify much clearer language that will hopefully fill in those gaps that you're talking about, Deacon. To you, IG Phillips.
Thank you. So one thing I do want to say is that there, and I can let Lieutenant Hubbard, if he'd like to speak to this, periodic audits and inspections of BWC, but body-worn camera footage. So there's samples of body-worn camera footage that the OIA, the Office of Internal Accountability, does, that the OIG, hopefully once we get staffed up, will have the manpower and resources to also do, to identify late activations or out of compliance activations. I can definitely, since Lieutenant Hubbard is over OIA, but with that being said, I also want to just kind of keep us focused on what we are doing in this particular ad hoc. There are a lot of issues, challenges, and concerns that we all may have regarding Commissioner Garcia Acosta's concerns. Ceasefire. You and I were in a ceasefire debrief, and one of the recommendations that I spoke to you as well as Commissioner Rawls about was, okay, we need to start thinking about either a very high level DGO regarding ceasefire that speaks to a PMP, a policies and procedurals manual that kind of outlines step by step certain things that then can help to inform a lot of this work in a way that can guide and provide guardrails and guidance to our ceasefire officers in the ceasefire unit. So I just want to kind of put a pin in that, and I think that that may be a conversation that the commissioners can have. There is a ceasefire unit that Captain Shavies is over at this time, so that's something that I think that we should kind of put a pin in. But Lieutenant Hubbard, if you kind of like to speak to the audits that OIA does, and whatever they find, what that may potentially lead to.
Yeah, thank you for that. And right off the bat, it's important for me to say that not every body worn camera is reviewed. However, there are a lot of avenues to which body worn camera is reviewed, and it's not even specific to just, hey, I'm auditing body worn cameras. So the sergeants are tasked with doing regular audits. There's a committee led by Deputy Chief Beer that reviews force, and the use of force sample is actually provided by our monitoring team, and in that a lot of body worn camera is reviewed. Each captain is tasked with reviewing force at a different level. For them, there's internal investigations that require body worn camera review. I know the CPRA reviews a lot of body worn camera with their investigations. So there are a lot of avenues to which body worn camera is reviewed, and to include officer demeanor, general conduct. Are they being respectful? Customer service, timely activations. Are they deactivating according to policy? So there's a lot being covered.
Thank you for that, LT.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other questions? I am pleased to thank you, Commissioner Garcia Acosta, for taking over hosting privileges. And thank you for our Chief of Staff, Michael Montgomery, setting this all up. So want to ask at this point if I should go back to the agenda topics, or are there any more questions that I need to stop for? Okay, looks like I'm gonna pull that back up. Okay. Sorry, having a, okay. So I'm not sure that we asked if the data for the pretextual stops, can this data inform the trajectory of the ad hoc?
I'll have to check with my data analyst. I don't know if I have data that specifies pretextual stops. In fact, in the recent risk management meetings, I haven't heard that term come up a lot. And what I often hear is just one or two things. Is it high injury network stop, and or is it Intel led stop? But I'll have to ask to see if we have flagged any specific stops that may be considered pretextual, but nothing comes to mind recently.
Okay. And do you think that perhaps we could take a look at the M19 violations that were considered class 2, that had they been considered class 1, they'd be racial profiling? Am I making it too simple, or am I misunderstanding it?
I don't, the data is available for that. We would know based on the manual of rules violation,
Correct.
which would be class 1, class 2. I'm sorry if I don't know enough to where how deep a dive that can be, or just general synopsis. Yeah.
I'm asking questions because I'm looking for answers, and more often than not, you're the one that can provide them. So that's good. And, I'm not trying to be simplistic around it either. So I see IG Phillips' hand is up.
Chair, if you don't mind, I can definitely talk with Lieutenant Hubbard offline.
Yes.
So that we can kind of take a look at what data we do capture, and if there's capability to capture additional data, and what that potentially looks like, understanding that there is an IT the component in that. So I would be happy to discuss on behalf of the commissioners and ad hoc
Thank
in
you.
a little bit more detail. if
Yeah, no,
that's
thank you for that offer, because, you know, my ears are perked up as it relates to the class 2, to figure out, you know, if, I wouldn't say they were misfiled, but, you know, if you have a large number, then kind of have to take a look at that and hopefully back into it, or front face it for the updates to this policy. So back to you, Lieutenant Hubbard. Can you talk about any trends in the number of pretextual stops over years based upon the changes in the policy? And if you don't have an answer to that right now, hopefully you could check that out and report back to us.
Certainly, and it just, with the new law, being that it's 3 months into the
Oh,
year,
yeah.
it takes
Yeah.
some more time, but we have a risk management meeting coming up on Tuesday. And what I can do is I have the agenda that I wrote for the chief, and I can just add that in there as something that we need to pay attention to. Yeah.
That will be wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Number 2 on that list was education surrounding OPD policies, and to IG Phillips' bright idea around potentially us doing a forum to help educate folks around the changes. I know that that's going to be important. I know no matter how many times we do it, we'll be missing somebody, but the fact that it can be done, that we can videotape it and put it on the website for the benefit of all community would be great. But if there are any other education surrounding OPD policies, you know, and we talked a little bit about DGOs versus, excuse me, Department General Orders, I'm messing up my own rule, versus the manual of rules, versus anything else. Did you want to add anything to that, or is that kind of clear enough? And we have IG's hand up. Go ahead.
I'm feeling like folks are getting tired of me, but after our last ad hoc meeting, I did solicit input from Lieutenant Hubbard as well as Deputy Chief Wong to kind of put a one-pager together. There's some additional feedback, so we're going to revise that and add some other options based on some follow-up from Chief Wong. So that went out to the commissioners, and that was also posted on OIG's website, social medias, and things of that nature. It'll also go out in our newsletter, the revised one, to ensure that it's, you know, of course, it's a snapshot. It's not as exhaustive as the actual. There's a DGO that I didn't even know about, that Chief Wong and Lieutenant Hubbard let me know about, that outlines all of them. And it's just great. So we utilize that as kind of a framework for us to kind of put some informationals out with a little bit of infographic. So it's helpful. And I think that a did you know campaign, or, you know your rights campaign, as we start to move forward with some of these changes in the laws, it might be helpful. And I do just want to acknowledge that Lieutenant Hubbard and Chief Wong did come and put some input. We had a little bit more manpower in OIG to get it done, but leading me to the departmental general order, that was helpful, and then reviewing the document to ensure that the language and verbiage that we summarized the DGO was true and accurate, and we didn't change the essence and language that the DGO was meant to say. And I think that that's something that we can continue to do as we move forward with educating community about changes and new policy provisions, and even our ad hocs, right? So that they can come in and listen and guide them to departments' website and their information, as well as OIG, commission, and CPRC.
Thank you very much, IG. And I just want to clarify that I heard you correctly. You had worked on one, but based upon the input that you got from Deputy Chief Wong, you're going to revisit it and then send it out to us and post it. Is that what I heard?
So an iteration already went out. We're going to add a little bit more supplemental information that Chief Wong thought was germane as well. Um, so we provided that feedback and we sent that back over to OPD again, just to make sure that some of the language that we changed to make it a little bit more lay still provides the essence and the information to the citizenry and the residents of Oakland. And I don't think we got any input back just yet, so I can follow up. And Lieutenant Hubbard, if I'm wrong and I missed it, please correct me.
Okay, thank you very much. And would this document also include special orders and the distinction between what a training bulletin is? Or is that, yes? Thank you, Lieutenant Hubbard. So now it would seem that we can advance up to number 3, which is the discussion and timeline around revisions to DGOM 19, prohibitions regarding racial profiling and other bias-based policing. The last time it was updated, was that 2004, or am I confusing my my policies? I know so many of them are like 15 years old, so.
Please give me one moment as I look this up.
No problem. Thank you very much. Take your time.
So I'll jump in really quick. So yes, November 2004 was when it was established. There were 2 special orders subsequent, and the special orders were utilized to supplement the information. One was report writing regarding stops, and I'm just summarizing. And LT, if you have it right in front of you, please provide a little bit more detail. And then there was some supplemental definitions as well. And I think that the last special order that supplemented M19, I want to say it was 2010, but I don't have it right in front of me. Oh, look, I'm okay. I know my stuff now. Thanks, Lieutenant Hubbard. Appreciate you.
Well, I've never known you not to know your stuff, but it's always helpful if you have a partner, quote unquote, in crime or in thought leadership. And I would want to have Lieutenant Hubbard if I needed one. So there you go. Anything to add to that, Lieutenant Hubbard?
I can't compete with that. Her memory is spot on. She got it right.
Okay, excellent. So there were 2 updates, and did I miss when those updates were, IG?
Sorry, I was in another screen about to resend this infographic to you guys. 2010. So I
Okay.
can follow up.
So we're still 14 years out.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that to Lieutenant Hubbard's point a little bit earlier, and the reason I keep saying Lieutenant Hubbard is because he is my point of contact for the most part at OPD in this work. So I get on his nerves and I drill down on a lot of the same questions that the commissioners have already asked. That's why I'm like, oh, got it, want it. Because I also too share the same, many of the same concerns. So we kind of walk through a lot of this, and he'll kind of counter some things, and I'm like, okay, well, can we kind of do things this way? So to Deacon Law's point a little bit earlier, I asked quite a few of the same questions beforehand, so I can come here and try to inform the commission as well as the residents. Not to say that Lieutenant Hubbard cannot. So I'm
Yeah,
also
well, I think we are all benefiting from your curiosity and your research in advance of meetings. So thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. So now we're at the point where we're doing a discussion and a timeline around our revisions. I know that our next meeting, which will be in April, we will be joined by more community members. But what we wanted to do was ensure that we identify our cadence so that we stay on track when we add more bright ideas from more community members. Any thoughts about our timeline or, what we want to tackle when. I know that Lieutenant Hubbard, you're going to rip off your long list of things to add and then we'll be off to the races, but just wondering if there's anything else we ought to be doing within the discussion. IG Phillips.
Thank you so much. I think what will be very helpful is that meaning the OIG, will receive OPD's response to the recommendations in M19 and of course the supplemental information as it relates to the laws and any other things that were identified by Lieutenant Hubbard and others in OPD prior to our next meeting. I requested a response by March 25th. So the OIG will focus on turning that around. Should we need to have a meeting with Lieutenant Hubbard, DC Wong, Chief Allison, or others, we'll try to have that beforehand so we can make sure that this body has the document and we can discuss it at our next ad hoc meeting as well as the whole commission and members of the public. We'll try to get that out as soon as possible, turn it around, as long as there are no challenges with that communication and the response from OPD.
Okay, that sounds great. And it sounds like the deadline for a response is absolutely within the time frame. Our next ad hoc meeting, which will be 2 weeks from tonight, will be Wednesday, April 3rd at 6 p.m. So hopefully we'll have all kind of information. Now, do we want to try and prescribe a timeline of what it is that we intend to do? Or, because I know that sometimes we can move faster or slower depending upon where we're going. I know that we need to do a manual of rules, but it's my understanding that would be far more efficient and appropriate to address our policy changes to M19 first. Would that be correct, Lieutenant Hubbard? I'm seeing hands up.
It would, however, I don't see that being challenging to add a section in the manual rules specific to racial profiling with the description of what that violation would be. I just don't see that challenging. There might be some mean confer issues with the union on it, but the actual task of getting that done, I don't see that challenging.
That's wonderful to hear. Chair Peterson?
That was my question as well, whether or not whatever we do, does it have to go to a meet and confer? Because those can be lengthy, or it could be something short like a meet and discuss. So if we're just talking about putting a definition in MOR, is that what you're saying? No, I thought you were talking about wholesale changes.
Yeah, so we're Lieutenant Hubbard has talked about creating a section, but we're going to go through M19 to ensure that there aren't other areas where we want to provide updates, because as we just heard, there have been none for 14 years. We obviously also want to ensure that they comport with new laws or the ways in which OPD goes about or has adjusted in the last 14 years. The other thing is we'll want to determine when we're going to look at the training, because that will also be an important part of it. Then we will, and I don't know the cadence, so, the MOR maybe comes last or comes before we do our letter to post. I'm happy to hear any recommendations, because there is a synchronicity or sequencing that needs to go on. I don't know.
Okay, so changes to the MOR and
but we don't have an MOR, so we actually have to create.
So we're writing an MOR, and we're also going to write training
plus
the letter of the
updating
post.
the M19 policy, the DGO.
I think this could take a long time if we're not careful.
Well, we want to be thorough, but I think that at this 5 minutes that maybe we could set aside the timeline and see what we get April 3rd, and then begin to parse out the timing that we think it should take. But this is discussion, so,
Yeah, I
I'm all in.
understand.
Commissioner Garcia Costa, do you have any burning questions or concerns? No? Okay. Deacon Lyles? Calling everybody out now. I want to hear
I'm
it.
good. I'm very good. Thank you.
Okay, all right, terrific. Lieutenant Hubbard?
I just, one thing I want to answer to Commissioner Peterson, it's not so much the definition, the manual of rules, that's going to be a mean confer issue. It's the discipline matrix that goes with it. Like, okay, if this
Yeah.
is violation, what's the range? That's going to be the biggest sticking point.
Yeah, and that's usually and that's part of the whole package.
Exactly, it has to be. The other thing is, based upon how we may or may not want to have a like a summary introduction, and I'm not sure if that would go with the manual of rules or if that actually is a kind of an overview of M19. But I thought it was very important, and I could be by myself with this, so I can be talked out of it, but very important to create some context for the history of racial profiling. Because there are those that don't think it exists. There are those that have never had an experience with stopping, so therefore they think, oh, people have overblown this. I mean, just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it isn't happening. And depending upon what you look like, it doesn't mean, it may mean that it happens a lot more. And maybe it's happening less than it did. But I want to try and ensure that the updates that we make to the policy, the trainings, creating of the MOR and sending a letter to post, that this particular policy can hold its own for maybe the next 15 years, unless, something comes off the, Assembly bill or Senate line that is just, we've got to add it, because we recognize the man and woman power that it takes to update these policies with so many 15 and 20 years old. We have to kind of anticipate and vision craft a bit to ensure that the staying power and the being able to trust what we've written down is what we expect to have happen. And I always wonder about the truthfulness thing. Both my parents are lawyers, and it's kind of, okay, so what can you prove? We know somebody lied, but can we prove it? So I'm also interested, in the update of the section that speaks to not misleading information, but ruse and lies. I mean, it's unfortunately tough truth, but it's real, and it's on the backs of Black and brown people. So we got to get it right, and we need to ensure that it can stay, alive for a long time to come. IG Phillips?
I know we're right at 7:30, but I do concur and I do agree and know that there are recommendations regarding expansion on the purpose of the policy that the OIG did provide. And I think that there is some consensus with OPD that could be beefed up a little bit, but I'll defer and wait until we get the response from OPD. I'm just looking forward to that so we can start getting to the work. And the OIG will do as much work on the back end, understanding that we meet only once every 2 weeks, that there is a lot of work that can also be done during that time frame. And I can communicate and touch base with the commissioners on this ad hoc to ensure we're moving in the right direction so that things do not have to sit in ad hoc too long. This is a very important policy, I think, to all of us.
Thank you for that extraordinary offer of extra work. combined with your favorite thought partner, Lieutenant Hubbard. So just appreciate what work you'll be doing between now and when we meet again, which will be Wednesday, April 3rd from 6 to 7:30. And I want to take just a slight position of privilege since I have some of my favorite people on this this webinar. And that is that yesterday, City Council approved the naming of Regina Jackson Way on International Boulevard. So really, really excited. Just wanted to share it.
Congratulations, ma'am. Congratulations.
Congratulations. I hope I've never pulled over on that street.
Thank you.
Well, we'll show you the ticket.
Right, right. Thank you very much. So with that, I
which,
just want to say
which
thank you
street
very
is it?
much.
Which street is it?
Oh, it's gonna be on International. It'll be the block between 82nd and 83rd where the building is.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
EOIC.
control that block. You own that block.
That's right.
Well, apparently it's official now.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
You'll all be invited to the unveiling, but I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Please, yes.
Another masterful meeting. I thank you all very much. And for our listening public, hopefully you learned a lot and you'll be back here at the same bat channel, April 3rd, Wednesday, 6 to 7:30. Thank you.
Everyone have a great night.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
night.